No intro, gang. No, but seriously, welcome back to the channel. No one needs intros, right? They're just a waste of time. I kinda wish I'd never done an intro on ATA. It's just like 10 seconds of your life that is just wasted. Anyway, we've got an interesting episode for you today. It's another interaction that didn't quite meet the criteria for a full episode of ATA. So once again, I figured I would cover it here. And it involves a law enforcement agency that we really don't get to talk about that much, which is the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. So for those of you who don't know, ICE was created back in 2003 when then President Bush signed the Homeland Security Act of 2002, which also incidentally created the Department of Homeland Security. ICE essentially took over the services of what used to be the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and they have three main functions: immigration enforcement, the investigation of the movement of illegal people and products, and of course the prevention of terrorism. So we've talked about this a little bit before on ATA, but for this episode it's important to remember that most federal agents hold some kind of congruent authority to enforce state law. So most of the time, ICE agents, FBI agents, or marshals, they typically have the authority to act as a state police officer as much as they do a federal enforcement officer. But that's generally relegated to whatever state they're operating in. Currently, ICE has about 20,000 employees, 400 offices worldwide, and a yearly budget of like $7.5 billion. So it's safe to say it's a thriving agency. One quick note before we get into the episode is that nothing I say here should be construed as some kind of opinion on illegal immigration. Save that political baggage for some other discussion. We're just here to talk about what happened and the legal nuance surrounding that. Nothing more, nothing less. So let's just get right into the interaction and talk about what happened. On September 18th of 2017, a man named Isidro Tafalla and his wife, Renee Andrade, went to the Washington County Courthouse in Hillsboro, Oregon. They were there because Miss Andrade had been summoned in regards to a DUI charge. When they arrived, they found a group of people outside the courthouse protesting. These protesters were there specifically because of some tactics that ICE had been using recently, where they would wait for potentially illegal immigrants to exit the courthouse and then detain, question, and arrest them. Mr. Tafalla and Miss Andrade had no idea this protest was happening before they went to the courthouse that day, and they were simply there to resolve the charges laid against Miss Andrade. So needless to say, they walked right past the crowd and went into the courthouse to take care of their business there. There were two ICE agents stationed outside of the courtroom on either side of the entrance, and it's believed that they were looking for someone in particular, a man named Arturo Ramirez, who also had court that day. As Mr. Tafalla and his wife entered the courtroom, he was followed by these two agents who sat themselves a few rows back. It is alleged that every person on the court docket's name was read aloud that day, including Mr. Ramirez. When Mr. Ramirez's name was called, he went before the judge, and he was even offered a diversion sentence for a DUI charge that he was there for. Now bear in mind, everyone in the courtroom supposedly saw this. Mr. Ramirez was called by name and went up to the judge, spoke to the judge, and walked away from the judge, in plain view of Mr. Tafalla, his wife, and the two ICE officers who were sitting behind them. Eventually, Mr. Tafalla's wife was called, her matter was resolved, and the two left the building, with two ICE agents trailing behind them. As the couple approached their vehicle to leave, an unmarked minivan swiftly pulled in and parked in front of them, and out came two ICE agents. A legal observer from the American Civil Liberties Union of Oregon noticed the officers confronting the couple and decided to start recording and run over to assist. And that's basically where this video picks up. So now that you have all that information and context, let's jump into the video and see what it's all about.
And someone from another car just shot to them. Do you have a warrant?
What?
Do you have a warrant?
Do you know this person?
Are you with ICE? Do you have a warrant for arrest? Do you have
What's
any
your last name?
identification? Do you have
What's your
any
last name?
identification
What is this
that you can show them?
So this
Excuse me, ma'am. Please step back.
picture right here.
Do you have any identification that you are showing them?
Bitch, please. Bitch, please. That is not my husband.
Do you have Do you have?
You are not. You are not
Who
a part
are
of
you?
the court.
Who are you?
You are not part of the court. We do not know you. Please back away from my husband.
Yes.
Please back
Get out
away
of here.
from our car before we call the cops.
Alright, so the first thing that stands out to me is that neither of these individuals who are claiming to be some sort of authority figure look like police officers of any kind. To me, these look like random people coming up and asking other random people what their name and date of birth is. How are they supposed to know that any of this is legitimate, especially with the van being an unmarked vehicle as well? This is a totally reasonable response to some random vehicle pulling up on you, two people jumping out and demanding to know who you are, and even accusing you of being someone that you know you're not. So the big question becomes, would they even have the legal authority to arrest him? And unfortunately, the answer is probably. So we have a system currently set up that allows officers to arrest pretty much anyone for matching a description. And I'll link a video in the description if you want to learn more about that in particular. The problem is that it's pretty easy to mistake someone's identity, especially based off just a description or just one photograph. There have been many cases of mistaken identity in the history of law, and even computers sometimes mistake people's identities. Now, that's not to say that the system we have is bad per se. It's always been the opinion of the Supreme Court that sometimes things will happen that will interrupt the day and the lives of everyday citizens that are genuinely a mistake. And the logic here is we kind of just have to accept that as a caveat for having a policed nation. Members of law enforcement are people, and people make mistakes. And the law should be drafted around a system that doesn't necessarily cater to this, but it acknowledges its possibility. As of right now, it doesn't seem like anything unlawful is happening in the video so far. Even if these were not police officers, it's not illegal to park your car in front of someone and get out and approach them and ask them for their identifying information. Of course, there would be no legal obligation for the person that's being questioned to respond, but so far these officers haven't detained anyone or done anything outside the scope of their authority. But of course, that could all change if an arrest is made. So let's jump right back into the video and just see what happens.
Before we call the cops. You stay your role. You stay your role. That is not my
Are you getting your gun?
Please, get out of here.
Does
That is not my husband.
anybody have any ID? Does anybody have a warrant?
No. No, you don't need to show anything to this bitch.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 agents.
These random
We have
people
3
are
cars.
approaching us
They're
and asking my husband for his identification. We have no idea who any of these people are. We literally just walked out of the courtroom and we're being approached right now. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
This is absolutely ridiculous. We
Let's
don't know
go
any
home.
of these people.
Get the fuck out of here.
Get
Nobody
the
wants
fuck
to
out
hear.
of here, you son of a bitch.
Is that one? That? That one?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
What did they ask you?
Take a picture.
They this woman asked my husband what his first and last name was, asked him for his ID, showed a mugshot to him, and told him that that was him. It was not even the same picture. Who the hell is she?
Did they follow you out of the courtroom?
Yes.
Apparently.
They were in the same. They were
I was
there
wondering
near
why
us,
she parked
and then
right
we
here.
came out
I
of the
had no
courtroom and she
idea, but
followed
then-
us. I don't understand what's going on.
Alright, so in case you didn't catch that, that was actually a supervisor that arrived on the scene, and once the officers realized that Mr. Tafala wasn't actually Mr. Ramirez, they quickly dispersed. So let's do a quick recap of what happened there. ICE agents have been conducting a sting operation to arrest illegal immigrants who came to court. They sat in the courtroom and actually watched the guy who they were looking for go up to the judge and leave the courtroom. But they were so focused on Mr. Tafala that they completely missed the guy that they were actually there to capture. And then they proceed to show Mr. Tafala a picture of Mr. Ramirez as some kind of justification for demanding to see his identification, all while dressed like average people on the street in unmarked vehicles. I mean, anyone driving up to that situation could have reasonably assumed that a kidnapping was about to take place. And it just blows my mind that they had that many officers there, that many cars, that much communication, and that much resources. and yet they still completely missed the guy who they were there to get. I mean, that just says all you need to know right there, right? How incredibly inefficient and just bad at your job do you have to be before some kind of consequences are faced for those actions? Now, I'm not saying the officers here did anything warranting a lawsuit. Maybe they did though. So on September 20th of 2017, a couple of U.S. representatives, Earl Blumenauer and Suzanne Bonamici, they wrote a letter to the ICE field director, Elizabeth Godfrey, essentially urging some kind of investigation into how these officers treated Mr. Tafalla. But of course, Ms. Godfrey took the side of her agents and denied any wrongdoing, and ultimately refused to conduct any kind of investigation into the conduct of these officers. So that led the ACLU to file a $100,000 tort claim against ICE. In this claim, the ACLU characterized the agents' actions as torturous and alleged that the officers only stopped Mr. Tafalla based on his race. So no matter where you stand on the whole immigration issue, I think we can all agree that the federal agents who enforce these laws should certainly hold themselves to a higher standard than this. So let's talk about what could have been done better. First of all, I applaud Mr. Tafalla's wife for being so vocal about her opposition to this stop, and to the individual who was vigilant enough to begin recording this interaction. Of course, like I say, like nearly every video, invoking the right to silence is always a powerful tool for the citizen, but sometimes verbally announcing your disagreement and your disdain for the conduct of the officers may work in your favor, but this is almost never the case. In this instance, it worked out, but that's typically not how it's gonna go. Encounters can quickly spiral out of control from being too aggressive with your protest to an arrest, and remaining calm is probably the best thing you can do whenever you're interacting with police of any kind. As for the officers, personally, I don't agree with this investigative tactic in these types of sting operations. It seems to me that if there are illegal immigrants in our country, which undoubtedly there are, why would you be focusing on arresting the ones that are actually showing up for court and participating in their civic duty? Chances are most of the individuals attending a courtroom are not actually illegal immigrants, and I suspect that most illegal immigrants don't show up to court or pay any fines. It just seems like there are probably much better ways to capture illegal immigrants than wait for them outside of a courthouse. And it just boggles my mind to think that this is how federal officers are representing our federal government. I mean, honestly, this looked like a mafia hit or something. Like they just rolled up on this guy, hopped out of their car, and ran up to him all aggressively, demanding to know who he was, while looking like everyone else who was there. For all this guy knew, these were protesters. They look like the type of people that would drag you to a dark room at the Bellagio and interrogate you about counting cards. So it goes without saying that these officers could have been much more professional in almost every aspect of this encounter. Anyway, short video, I know. That's all I got for you today. Let me know if you enjoy this type of content. If you would like to see me review more of these shorter style interactions, I'm always interested in hearing your feedback and your ideas, and I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to spend a few minutes here with me today. But that's all I got for you. Until the next one, cheers.